Hello and welcome everybody to another Neighborly Faith webinar. This is actually our last this year and we're so thankful that you're tuning in again. Today we are so excited to talk with Summer Albarcha and Jeanette Johnson. Did I say both of those correctly?
Yes.
Awesome. About the topic of being an influencer without losing your faith. This is really exciting for all of us to be able to talk to these two people and have them share their expertise with you and us about what they, I think, very uniquely have become, I think, experts in. So before we get going, this time we're not going to have Q&A, but we're going to ask them some questions that we've gathered from people in our community about them and their work, just broadly, and what they can speak to. But to get started, who is in the room? First is Summer Albarcha, who I will introduce. In 2012, Summer started a modest fashion blog called Hipster Hijabs while a teenager in the St. Louis area. At the age of 18, she was invited to Dubai to speak at Fashion Forward to address the lack of modest fashion trends in the USA. Soon, Summer learned her blogging could make a difference and decided to continue her love for fashion through her college career as Summer Albarcha. Today, Summer has over 500,000 Instagram followers from around the globe, where she shares outfits of the day by her love for layering. Her inspiration is drawn from attending fashion weeks worldwide, which is super cool. I want to hear about that. Mm-hmm. And while she may not participate in every trend, she loves that it expands her creativity and staying true to her signature look. And Rena, do you want to introduce Jeanette?
Yeah, I'd love to. Jeanette Johnson writes about style full-time on her popular blog, Jay's Everyday Fashion, offering practical tips and tricks for real women with real budgets as they navigate their daily personal style journeys. She's also the author of Jay's Everyday Fashion and Faith, a personal style with purpose and beautiful awakening to your radiance within. In addition to writing, she regularly appears on morning shows and does a host of public appearances and speaking engagements. Recently, Jeanette founded Wall Crawl, a blend of a traditional photo studio and a trendy Instagram pop-up in Orlando.
Which I want to hear about because that looks really cool. So we've talked enough. I want to hear from each of you and let everyone hear you as well. So Rena, do you want to ask that first question?
Yeah, so this first question is, how did you come to do what you do now, and what's kind of your story in like 3 minutes? And we'll start with you, Jeanette.
I'm so happy to be here, guys. This is so fun. And thank you for that wonderful bio. I feel like you already shared a lot, but how I came to be doing what I'm doing today, 10 years ago, I learned of the idea of blogging, and I actually grew up on a farm in Kansas, and I don't know, just one weekend I had this idea that I should take pictures of my work outfits and post them to Facebook, because at the time, you couldn't find pictures of anyone just in kind of like their normal everyday outfits. And I thought I would love to see this, because this was years before Instagram and Pinterest and things like that. So I just started posting on a whim, and it completely blew up. I was doing it full time within 2 years. I was averaging 15 million page views a year, working with all of the top brands, like budget-friendly brands like Macy's, JCPenney, Kohl's, Nordstrom, things like that. My husband and I got married in 2015. He's a photographer, so we were traveling the world creating content. And then I'm actually sort of semi-retired from blogging now recently, as my husband and I co-founded Wall Crawl, which is a photo studio concept in downtown Orlando. And I also recently co-founded a company called Eden Ivy, which I'm wearing today, which is a clothing line that employs women survivors of sex trafficking in Nepal, that is launching on HSN this summer. So I've been kind of focusing on those new projects a little bit more, but certainly I'm most known for my days of blogging.
Right on. That's super cool.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. Summer, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so similar to Jeanette, I began my blog in high school. I was attending a public high school and wearing a headscarf for the first time. I'd get a lot of questions from my classmates about how did you match your scarf to your outfit? How many scarves do you own? I'd get all these like really nice questions. So I thought I should make an Instagram page where people in my high school can just follow along, and I'll tell them where everything is from. That way it kind of like inspires others in my high school area. And so I was thinking very like local scale when I started my blog, and from there it kind of started to reach a global audience, just because in 2012 there was not any really modest influencers or the concept of influencer, I would say, on Instagram. And initially I felt really inspired after just typing the hashtag modest fashion and just being able to see all these pictures of people around the world that you wouldn't see typically on Facebook if they weren't your friend. This just became an outlet to find new people that were very similar to you that you wouldn't have found before. So I really wanted to just be a part of this movement and this community. And so I started sharing my own photos online. Eventually it reached, as I said, a more global audience that I was invited to Dubai to speak at their conference about modest fashion in the West. And it was the panel called Modest Fashion in Modern Times. And from that kind of got a lot of press coverage, like on AP Press, and a lot of more interviews. And so that led me to really take this hobby of mine more seriously, more professionally. So it kind of required me to grow up faster, I would say. Like, I was 18 and I was like, okay, I'm going to start this as a business, and I'm going to, make sure that everything I'm doing has like a goal behind it. And I'm going to always inspire women to just, be able to go to work in the morning and go to school in the morning and be active members of society while feeling confident and very, feeling it's very easy to get ready in the morning, and just really being able to hold on to their values. And that's kind of what I did. And so ever since then, I've been very consistent with sharing posts and sharing ideas and working with different companies and trips. And that's kind of where I am today.
Incredible. I love that both of your stories started really grassroots. Do you have any? Yeah, it's so cool that like you both were like, oh, I just started doing this and it took off. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. It's inspiring too. I think anyone is listening that's like, I've thought about doing this thing, but I don't have 2,000 followers to start with or something. Maybe that's, what you might be thinking. Like, it's cool to hear from each of you, like, oh, I just started with my community and what I had.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's incredible to hear. And I want to ask each of you, both of you are unique among people that are entrepreneurs or influencers. Your faith is kind of towards the front of your identities. Either you've put it there or it's naturally there. I think wearing a hijab, kind of naturally people know you're Muslim. And Jeanette, you've been very public about your faith and your writing, etc. So I want to know, since this is a topic about like how to be an influencer entrepreneur without losing your faith, are there any ways that you've found it challenging to kind of have that faith identity towards the front of business in a way? And do you have any stories or any experiences around that?
I can start with like
go ahead.
So when I was living in St. Louis, I would say also due to the time, just the whole Instagram, the idea of Instagram and social media influence was not as large as it is now. But I felt definitely it was very difficult to get a lot of opportunities that other people perhaps living in bigger cities were getting. And I think also wearing a headscarf was something new to see online for brands to be working with. I can definitely say that I wasn't able to be on as many campaigns or opportunities up until perhaps like 2016, 2017 when it started to pick up. But beforehand, it was still like something new. And people probably didn't see how mainstream that just wearing hijab or just having like a public identity of your faith could be. But then I found that when I moved near New York City about 2 years ago, that it was actually a very diverse population and people were very much open to working with people of different backgrounds, of different faiths as well. And I actually found this to almost enhance my opportunities in a way because I was able to provide a unique voice, something that people are now looking for when they're wanting to work with people. And I always want to stay true to my goals. So whenever I am pitching to a company or anything like that, I always tell them that this is the reason why I share photos or why I share content. And even when writing a caption or when taking the photo, I always want to keep that in mind. And I think in turn that makes your audience want to also be excited about seeing you work with different companies because they're like, oh, they include representation or they want to empower women of all different backgrounds. And at the end of the day, I mean, Muslim women are consumers of these products just like other women are. And so businesses should want to pertain or like work or advertise to people of all backgrounds, I would say.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Jeanette, has it been hard in any ways for you or has it been an opportunity putting your faith towards the front of your profile?
Yeah, I think it's definitely both. I think looking back, because hindsight is 2020, starting my blog was so much entrenched in how I was raised and how I grew up, and in a very conservative Christian environment. And I went to a Christian high school, and for me, fashion and beauty was not modeled at all. So it was completely absent. And in fact, what was modeled was, we don't spend any time and money on this whatsoever. And you shouldn't spend any time and money thinking, about it either. So I moved to Boston after college, and I found myself really struggling in the corporate world, really dressed inappropriately because I was too stubborn to buy clothes that were appropriate for work, because I didn't want to spend any money. I felt so much guilt about it. And so I wound up setting a clothing budget to force myself to buy clothes, because I knew, well, I was freezing cold because Boston's really cold and I needed coats and things like that. But also just to encourage myself to really try to improve that area of my life that was holding me back. And in doing that, I wasn't allowed to guilt myself about that amount of money I had set aside. I was very responsible with it. I looked at my budget and figured out what was, definitely affordable. And I just flourished. Like, I couldn't believe how much I loved putting together outfits, and everyone almost immediately at work was, oh my goodness, did you put that together? And how did you do that? And I was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just kind of, hanging out here, just trying to figure things out. And I started my blog, I want to say it was maybe 2 years after starting that clothing budget, because I really related to Summer Story. You get people asking you questions about what you're wearing. And so you think like, I'm going to start a blog and start talking about this because people always wanted to know. And I was really good at finding good deals. So I would blog those deals that I was finding. But it's interesting because in the beginning, it was that idea that was sort of fueling it. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, whether they're on a budget, a tight budget out of necessity, or whether they just are like me and just didn't want to be, spending a lot of time and money on it. And I was kind of giving them that resource, doing some of the work for them. And then after a while, it got really weird, because then I went from, okay, I have a clothing budget, this makes sense, to working full time in the fashion industry. And that is really weird, because that is not something I would have ever in a million years thought for myself. I had a lot of mixed feelings about it. As much as you can see sometimes that some of that messaging in childhood, or maybe the way you were interpreting a certain Bible verse, maybe you see it differently as you're an adult. It's really hard to sort of be going against what you feel was how you were raised and be so different than what you grew up around. And I think, unfortunately, that inner turmoil that I was feeling was absolutely being reflected around me, because I had constant comments from people using Bible verses to tell me that what I was doing was vain, posting pictures of myself, that I shouldn't be spending so much money on clothes. I used to post my clothing budget every month, which was really fun. I actually had the same clothing budget. I never changed it. Actually, it's smaller now, but it was $250 a month. And people would be so upset and tell me, as a Christian, how can you be spending this much money when there are people who are starving in other countries and in this country? And it was really difficult, because at one point I had a conversation. It was through direct message on Twitter, so it wasn't public. But this woman was telling me this and giving me Bible verses about why I shouldn't be spending as much money on clothes. And I said, would it change your mind any if you knew that I was tithing and donating to charity over $2,000 a month? Does that change anything? And she was still angry, because she just didn't think I should be making that much as a fashion blogger, and that was ridiculous, because it's a vain industry, and how dare you? And so there was just a lot of turmoil in it, and it really started to build, because while I had kind of made my peace with it by making the clothing budget and kind of found my place, when you're out there doing campaigns and being the face of brands like Macy's and JCPenney, and people know you as this fashion person, and you've still got those like remnants of guilt from before, from growing up, that was really when faith kind of became a little bit more of a part of my blog, because I wrote my first book. That was in 2017. So it was about 7 years after I started. Because before, my blog was always it's just fashion. It's not really anything in particular. I think when you're a person of faith, there's just sort of a fragrance of it. Whatever you do, people can kind of tell. And I'm sure I was sharing certain things on different religious holidays that kind of clued people in. But I wound up writing that book because I sort of needed to get to the bottom of the guilt myself and to sit down and ask those really hard, scary questions. Like, is it okay? And how much money is it okay to spend on clothes? And is this vain? And why is beauty part of this world? And what is that longing I feel to dress up? And what is that? And so it is, my first book is a very in-depth dive into the Bible and sort of looking at those Bible verses through a new lens. I think sort of to sum it all up, that a lot of times religions in general, but even movements like minimalism, they are formed for a very good reason. You know, the world tells us that as women, our appearance is the most important thing about us, and that we should spend all of our time and money looking as beautiful as we possibly can on the outside. And I think that to counteract that, a lot of times our faith says, you know, don't spend any time and money at all. You know, just it goes to the very opposite, and it wants you to just kind of be what I call beauty celibate. And I think that's really tough, because I don't think that one extreme answers the other. And I think it's actually controlling your appearance just as much as you would be. It's just a different kind of controlling your appearance, of, you know, almost trying so hard not to do anything to your appearance. So there's this beautiful middle ground that I think is like such rich, fertile soil for us to explore. And there's so much beauty there, and there's so much freedom in that middle space. And that's sort of what my book explores, and in general, where I came to this conclusion after writing it, and just found this healing of, I don't need to sort of feel this way anymore. And, but I'm really thankful, because I think it may sound like, wow, that was kind of a lot to go through, and I can't believe all of that happened. But I think what beauty comes from that I had these feelings of guilt, and I was able to work through them. And if I hadn't started a fashion blog and all these things hadn't happened, I don't think I ever would have worked through those things in my life. I think I just would have always probably just not ever really even known that I liked fashion. I probably would just be kind of staying small and doing my thing. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just think it ultimately is a really beautiful thing that it sort of helped me find my way, I think, and find some balance that I didn't have before, even if it was a little painful at times.
Yeah.
I think to add to that too, I definitely see the point, and I think that's something that I've also thought about, at least when I was beginning my blog too, is that people would say, you know, how come you own this many clothes? Or why are you promoting people to own this many things in their wardrobe? And so I'd always question that. And then I began to think about it, just like any other business, you know, you want to make an investment. And so in terms of a fashion blog, an investment is having a lot of outfits that you can mix and match. That way you can always create content for people, because at the end of the day, if you don't have those resources, then you're going to run out of content. And then to counteract that, I always made sure to sell my clothes when I was not wearing them online, and then use that money towards new clothing. So I really expanded my Depop page. I'd use sources like The RealReal and other online retail, like resale shops. And that's something me and my sister actively do, is that if there's something sitting in my wardrobe, we'll sell it before trying to purchase something new. And another thing I found that was helpful too to cope with that is just re-wearing pieces online and letting people know that, yes, as a blogger, I do have a bigger wardrobe than most people, just because that is my job. But at the same time, this is how I've worn this top so many ways. And oftentimes I'll do recaps on my stories, like this top throughout the years, all the ways I've worn it. And I just try to always make sure there's a balance, like you said, because I was feeling those initial phases of guilt too when Instagram first came out, because this is all new. And another thing I thought about too is that, if just like you said about the vein of posting photos online, you know, that's something I also felt a little bit in my community. But I realized that people were seeing me in person wearing the same outfits that they were seeing in photos. And so the only difference was that it was recorded for that moment. If I was wearing this already to school, I was wearing it already to work, I was wearing this already to my trips, I didn't feel like there should be a difference between a photo or a real life interaction. So those are just some tips I found that I thought I'd share.
I love it. I think we are kindred spirits, because I'm the same way. I used to do these here's 20 ways I've worn this navy blazer roundups on my blog. And I'm huge into reselling clothes and managing like what that looks like. It's just funny because I have my set amount of clothes that I think is normal, and to some people it's just they can't even handle how many clothes that is. But I always like to, I compare actually my book to this idea that if you were a chef and you had a huge spice collection at home or an impressive collection of cheeses, no one would be like, my goodness, like, well, that's awfully superfluous. Like, no one would ever question that in a million years. Like, it's so strange how we assign that to very, very specific jobs. And so I use those same ideas where I would say, I don't understand. And also, buying one $20 shirt could make literally $2,000, and then I can donate some of that to charity. It just makes no sense to create jobs in, with what we're earning. And it's just such a funny way of looking at it. But I'm so glad that you shared that, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that feels that way. So I so appreciate you sharing that, Summer. That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Jeanette, just to touch back on what you were saying about, working through writing that book and finding that middle ground. What was going through my mind is, as a girl, I think and not someone who's at all knowledgeable in fashion or good at styling things, but I go through extreme phases of feeling sort of that guilt, or maybe that faith background having that impact when I look at my wardrobe and I think, whoa, there is a lot in here that I don't need. And then going through and purging it all, and then just a week later feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't keep up with what's expected for me to look good. I need to buy a bunch more. So going through the extremes of having not enough and then way too much consistently because of what, you're trying to work through from what you feel is the right amount to have.
Yeah.
That minimum.
I think that's every woman's cycle a little bit. And then definitely if your faith is playing a part in that. But I think it's so funny because one story someone told me, and I don't remember which culture it was, which is actually probably better to just leave it blank, but they said that they knew a group of missionaries going to that country, and they had dressed sort of very plain, very we're not going to wear any makeup, and, just very, and they kind of realized when they got there, we will never reach this culture because this is important to them. And we look like the least, the people they should trust the least, because we just look like we don't know. We're just why would you be attracted to that if that's your culture that's important and that's seen as respect and being trustworthy? And so I think there's somebody out there, there's a pastor out there for everybody that's going to attract their tribe. And you even think about people like Carl Lentz, and he dresses a very certain way, and he's bringing in the Justin Biebers of the world. And if he didn't wear that, I don't know that he would attract people like that to his church. So I just think there's something out there for everybody. And we're all gonna, Summer's got her tribe and I've got mine, and there's reasons, that we all flock together. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah,
me too.
I love that you're both doing something. From your stories, it seems almost something new or something that's challenging, maybe some norms in your community in different ways. I want to know, have you had positive response from people who from a faith story or position would say oh, I was over here struggling with the same sorts of things, and now you've kind of shown me a different way. And Summer, I don't know if that overlaps completely, but have there been people that sort of say this is very inspiring to me, I didn't know I could dress in a certain sort of way in America?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there's been a lot of positive response. I mean, one of the main reasons I wanted to share my blog start my blog is that people would see that wearing hijab in this country was something that I wanted to make mainstream, and not something very difficult or very painful for girls to think that I have to sacrifice my beauty or my fun or my career to, wear something that pertains to my values. And I think that's something that I've pushed a lot. And my sister recently actually began wearing hijab a few days ago. She's 21 almost. And we used to always travel together for different fashion weeks. And I always take her my assistant. And then she told me I always see you wearing it and it doesn't bother you. It doesn't hinder you in any way. And I thought, why not? I've seen that you're really happy how you are. And so I just thought that was amazing. I was able to touch my own sister. So I just think that, let alone, even if it's not, I guess I'm trying to say is that there is a lot of, oh my God, I don't know why I just forgot the question.
You're answering it. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty much I've seen a lot of influence pretty much take place with, as she said, having their own tribe of people that want to stay in this middle ground. Like they want to have their values, but they also want to be out there. And I think the main thing I thought of was that, while you don't want people to judge a book by its cover, it's the first thing that people see when they want to get to know you. So in high school, I always made it a point to come across as like this very like happy, positive person. I always wore the most like colorful outfits because that's just my personality. And I think just how you look speaks a lot to who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jeanette, have you had any stories of people say, and I know you wrote a book, so you must, it has great reviews, people saying, I grew up in a place like you did, Kansas, and now I've been helped.
Yeah, my sort of movement, if you will, I think it has roots in faith, but it was much more about making budget fashion cool or like acceptable. So it's really hard to even think about this because it's changed so much. But 10 years ago, that idea of it's cool to shop at TJ Maxx was not a thing yet. It was very, very countercultural to come out boldly and start a blog and say, I shop at TJ Maxx and Ross and my entire outfit costs $100. And I'm proud of that. And here's where I bought everything and how much it cost. And I would take celebrity outfits and recreate them for like $100 using what I already had. I wouldn't even go out and buy. I would just take like copy their kind of copy. It was always a little bit different, but this idea of just boldly saying like I'm on a budget and I'm cool with that was pretty outrageous at the time. And I think that's partly why it attracted such a following so quickly too, because it was different, and even as fashion blogging started to take off, it was interesting because I would always have to explain to people because they'd be like, well, I don't understand. I haven't heard of your blog. Well, I'm like, the fashion blogging world is like a huge bubble, and then budget is this like little subset, and I'm like at the top of that bubble. So it's not really like the same thing. Like it's like two different worlds. You've got like the blogs that do the luxury fashion, and then you've got budget blogs. But it's been incredible because the world has changed so much. And I know that my blog was a part of that, partly because I wish I had actually recorded, because there are hundreds and hundreds of women who started blogs because they saw my blog and they would tell me, you inspired me to start my own budget fashion blog. I mean, that whole genre just completely exploded over those early years. And many of them would tell me directly inspired by that. And so I feel like my blog played a part in that sort of cultural shift, which is so exciting. And I love that because that shame that somebody kind of feels growing up, like I did, having to shop at thrift stores and having to, right now it's cool. Now I enjoy shopping at thrift stores, but there is this like shame about being on a budget that I just was like, I reject this, and I am going to have so much fun with the budget I have. And that was definitely something that people would tell me all the time, that I sort of helped them find that freedom in their own life too, to be excited about being on a small budget.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how maybe we were beneficiaries of kind of the like being thrifty, being good, because like we were college students like 2010-ish to 2014, and like it was kind of nice that you could go to a thrift store and people would be like,
"You got that from a thrift store?"
Yeah, that's from a thrift store. And we were like, yeah, it's all I can afford. Like,
yeah,
that's been great for us.
Yeah.
But do you want to ask that next question?
Yeah, just to respond a little bit, something that I really love about both of your stories is that it really did start from you individually acting on, hearing people say like, Summer, your headscarves and how did you pair these together? You did such a great job. And you, Jeanette, with like people asking about your work outfits. I love that both of your response to that was to act on it and to, go further into that direction. Because I know that requires a lot of bravery. And I'm sure there was many times at which you're like, oh my goodness, am I going to post this? But I love that whole story. That's super inspiring to me, to just, act on the skills that you have and what you're hearing other people say about you. So I really love that. And my next question is, we talked about the difficulties of being a person of faith in your industry. Is there anything that you have in your experience that is, around being a female person of faith or entrepreneur in your industries. And Summer, I'll ask you first.
Could you repeat the first part of your question again? Just like anything that is hindering, I'd say, or?
Anything hard or fun or easy, any stories that you have about specifically being a female entrepreneur or a female influencer?
I think overall, as I mentioned earlier, the concept of posting your photos online, I think a lot of people were questionable about that, even with just the security or privacy of, are people going to know where you live? Are people going to be able to follow you in person? And, you know, this is all very new in 2012. The idea of posting your photo for strangers was different. And I think that just caused a lot of wariness. But as the industry started to grow, I got a lot of these same like family members that were concerned coming and telling me, oh, that's really amazing what you've been doing with your platform. And I hear people at my work talk about you in St. Louis, or I've had people come up and tell me like, oh, you're related to her. That's awesome. And I felt like that conversation shifted from being wary of photos online to more of like, that's amazing that people know who you are and can recognize you. And I think nowadays it's just become so common that it's no longer really like a security issue. And I think that we've had enough experience where you can be more intentional with what types of photos you post or what poses you're doing or what you're exactly sharing. I think back then it was still all very new. So, you know, if people were sharing selfies, you're sharing selfies because that's the thing to do. But nowadays you can be way more intentional about the content you share and have way more meaning behind it just because you feel like that barrier is over and now you have more freedom as a content creator.
Yeah. Jenna, have you had any experiences, say, as a woman in this industry, especially as a woman of faith? And I know maybe a bit more background on the question is sometimes, especially if you have a religious background, there are certain areas of judgment, but there's also if you're speaking out on behalf of faith, sometimes in faith communities, they only want men to speak about faith, which is strange too. And I wonder, have there been any stories or experiences that you've overcome?
Well, it's interesting because fashion blogging is one industry that is very dominated by women. And in general, it's much harder to create a successful fashion blog, I would say, if you're a man, even though there are less of them. It seems like they actually knew a couple personally here in Orlando that were trying to start some, and they're very talented. They had better images than I did, and it never really went anywhere. And so I always felt like it was actually kind of a interesting situation to be in because I never really felt it in that sense. That's a really interesting point about women speaking in church. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way, but I think you're probably right. I will say that my book had an interesting response because part of it, I think, which without getting into too many of the details, is that I don't think it's quite clear from the cover and the title what it's about, was my impression that I got from and kind of feedback from people. So it was finding its way because of how it looks and what the title is into a lot of hands of very conservative Christians, and they were not happy with it. So, and it never really landed in that middle, the people that would be more interested in kind of that middle discussion that we talked about finding balance between the two. And it was really hard to land there. And I think now that I know more about the sort of Christian industry as a whole, I've read a lot of female authors in the space that I had not read before I wrote the book. I did not even realize that there was kind of a whole movement. Like, for example, with like Rachel Held Evans was kind of writing books that were actually, interestingly, we have a couple of the same points that we make, and I think that's amazing, but I just wasn't aware that it was going on. But I think in general, it is difficult to get footing because it is seen as kind of like a woman's problem a little bit, and I don't know that there are always as many, this is making a huge generalization, but there's not always as much of like, if you're men in leadership at a church, like they're not really going to be like, wow, we should do this thing to help women feel free from beauty, because I'm not even sure that they understand that completely. And they're probably like, they need encouragement to be more vain. I don't understand, like it sounds a little bit crazy. I get it. So they have to be very educated on the topic. or have some very progressive women in their church to want to even, why would they even want to have someone come speak about that? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's more of that, and less that I'm a woman that's coming to speak about it, and more just like, why would we even open this can of worms where we sort of want everyone to not be vain and to dress modest? Like, why would we have someone come stir that up? It seems very,
Yeah.
it's yeah, everybody kind of wants to keep the peace, right? And so I think it's just, I get it. Like, it's not the most fun conversation. I think it's a fun conversation, but it is difficult though too. It's still hard for me to have that conversation. So I think from that standpoint, yes. But I never thought about it that way. So thank you for asking that very intelligent question.
Add to what you said, I think that that's something that like the Muslim community does struggle a lot too. And a lot of the recent changes I've seen lately is just talking about more, for example, female empowerment because of the workplace. I think there's like, for example, so many Muslim women that wear hijab and are visibly Muslim in the health industry and business industries. And nowadays it's more about, okay, you know, women are already in these spaces. How can we send them a positive message as Muslims to either feel very confident in their hijab, or give them tips on what to wear to work, or how to, you know, wear a mask with their scarf, or all these things. I think that nowadays, like, we as women become so integrated into the work environment that you just can't not talk about it. I mean, even in church, even in our mosque, I would say a few years back, it would have been a bit more taboo to have more like female male interaction, I would say, in religious services. But nowadays you'll find a lot more because they're coworkers at work too. I mean, what difference does it make in or outside the mosque as long as it's all appropriate? So I think that's just like a conversation. I think like when I try to talk about my fashion blog in front of the older community or more conservative community, I always try to bring up that, you know, there's a lot of my friends who work in these industries and they're having to dress every day for work, and it really says a lot about their faith. And again, I mean, that's personally my goal as well. And I think that just tying it more into one way or the other to shift who is interested, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's really cool to hear from you, at least for me. I was just curious, your answer to that question and how navigating, I think you're doing amazing things in business and in public, but also you have faith communities or backgrounds that you kind of also have to navigate and to negotiate. So that's just super cool that, you know, you have those channels as well. We're at the end of our time, but I wanted to ask if there's any, do you have another question? Okay. If there's any, what are you up to now and how can people follow you? So,
Go ahead, Summer.
yeah. Oh, sorry. My bad. Jeanette, you go first and then Summer.
Okay. Well, my home base is definitely still my personal Instagram, even though I haven't been posting lately. I apologize. Is JS Everyday Fashion on Instagram. You can see links to all of the other companies that I'm working on right now, like Well Crawl and Nina and Ivy. Those are in the, what do you call it? The description.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way to just get all of the information is JS Everyday Fashion.
Awesome.
For me, it would be to head to Instagram at Summer Albarcha. That's my username. And from there, you'll keep up with my posts and, you know, where I'm going next or what I'm up to. And I think now with COVID, it's like the features are still a little bit unpredictable, but if you follow along there, you'll be able to find out how to follow along more.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We're really, pleased you joined us, and everyone who's listening, I think are going to learn so much. So yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an amazing time, and I hope that this video reaches a lot of people, and I can't wait to hear from you guys again.
Thanks, Summer.
Thank you guys so much. It was so nice to meet you, Summer.
Thank you. You
Hear
too.
your story.